Here we are live. Welcome everyone. I don't have my agenda packet here. Here. That's a supplemental. So I can do it. Hold on a second, please hold.
You don't have to read it, it's not the place.
We're in practice. Welcome everyone to the May 20th meeting of the Police Accountability Board. If you would like to access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device, use the URL in the packet. If you don't wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on your name to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon. On the screen, if you're joined by phone, dial the number in the packet to enter a meeting ID in the packet. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. I want to acknowledge our land acknowledgement in the public agenda packet. And with that, we'll go to agenda item 1, call to order and roll call.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Wells notified that he will be absent. Board Member Buzzwell-Charcot.
Here.
Board Member Nash also notified us that they will be absent. And Board Member Allen.
Here.
Before we move on to the next portion, I just want to provide our newest board member an opportunity to introduce themselves to the board and the public.
My name is Stephanie Allen. Been around in Berkeley since 1969. I was formerly on the Police Review Commission in the 1980s. I'm a retired union business agent, and I am currently the career technical education advisor to the school district and a member of the bond oversight committee.
Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot there. Okay, and then of course I want to acknowledge our staff. We have interim director Lee, investigator Weinberger, data analyst Madi, and myself, policy analyst Madigo. And on behalf of the BPD, we have Deputy Chief Tate joining us from Berkeley. With that, Chair, we do have a quorum. I do want to note that with the leave of absence and the unexcused absence, the majority vote would be 3, since we're taking quorum out of 5 members.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jose, and welcome everyone. Let's go to agenda item 2, which is the approval of the agenda. I just want to note for the agenda, we have 2 presenters today who will be each given 15 minutes, and then there will be time after that for questions from board members, just so that everyone is aware of the order of events. That's for agenda item 9A and 9C. If there's no modifications, then I should look for approval.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
And are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Seeing or hearing none, the motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's get to agenda item 3, public comment, and I'll give it back to Alice Maria.
Perfect. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matter from the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personal. I will start with those physically present before moving on to virtual attendees. Okay, no public comment from those present, correct? Okay. And I'll move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, if you'd like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand item. Chair, at this time, there are no hands raised.
Okay. We will have another public comment portion at the end. Everyone wants to weigh in then. With that, let's go to agenda item 4, approval of the minutes from April 22, 2026.
I make a motion.
I'll second.
Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes for April 22nd, 2026? Seeing or hearing none, the minutes are approved.
Okay, great. Let's go to agenda item 5. Director staff report.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome, Board Member Ellen. We are slowly getting up to speed. Unfortunately, Board Member Nash had something unexpected come up. This would have been his first meeting. But we hope to see him at the next. Speaking of which, I believe the chair has agreed to call a special meeting for June 3rd, is that right? Because there's the only regular meeting scheduled for June is June 17th, so we do have that extra time to have a special meeting. Probably the most significant thing that happened since our last meeting was the May 7th council meeting in which they considered the use of fraud and other surveillance technologies. And I'll just, it's agendized for later for further discussion, so I won't talk about that now because there'll be some discussion here. Vice Chair Wilson and I were in a meeting with internal stakeholders regarding the permanent regulations governing the complaint process against complaints filed against sworn officers. And it looks like we are pretty close to the end. And the last thing that I wanted to announce was that the community meeting will be held on May 26th. For members of the public to share your thoughts on the next Director of Public Accountability. And that's on page 112 of this evening's packet. The meeting will be hybrid, so you may attend in person or online. The other ways you can give your input are to answer a survey, make public comment at the June 9th council meeting, or to email the recruiter directly. And all that information is on the information flyer, which can also be found online. That's it for me.
Are there any questions for Director's Office? From the board? No? Okay, great, thanks, Director Lee, and thanks for being there at the council meeting. Appreciated that. And answering questions from the council members. I know that, you know, it's hard, you weren't exactly there in the whole year, so you did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now to chair and board member reports. Are there any? Well, I guess first, welcome to Board Member Allen. We're really glad to have you. I've been, you know, advocating for having a full bench here, and soon I think we're getting there. And so we're really glad to have you and to have your expertise and experience on this board. The other thing to build on what Director Lee was saying, I spoke to the mayor like an hour ago, and she would also like to do two things, which I think we can talk about at some point in the agenda today, under 9A probably. But she would like us to appoint two board members to be part of the interview committee that will be held on July 17th with the subcommittee from the council. And so that would be an all-day thing. And so we can discuss that more under 9A, under outreach and engagement, I believe. And the second is that we will probably, she also asked us to host our own open session where we discuss what sort of, you know, qualifications, you know, substantive experience or other things that we might be interested in as a board and having for the director, so that we can deliver those recommendations to the council as they consider in their director search. So those are two, in addition to the things that Director Lee raised, those are two things that we can discuss going forward. With that, are there any other reports from board members? Okay, great. Let's go on to, actually, I don't actually know, is there someone from, oh, Deputy Chief Tate is here. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and a special welcome to Board Member Allen. Look forward to our work together. I want to start by apologizing for not having watch commander there. Scheduling didn't allow for us to have one present tonight, so I do want to share that if there are any questions related to anything that comes up tonight, I'm happy to receive any questions via email and we'll happily follow up with you. Just a couple of things. Staffing updates. We are currently at 156 officers. We do have 6 recruits in the academy right now, with 5 additional recruits starting the ACSO Academy on May 26th. So that's just a week from tonight. And then 2 more starting in Sacramento on July 7th. On the professional staff side, our public safety dispatcher count is 19 with 4 still in training. And I would like to say on the recruitment side, our communications center manager retired, I think about 2 months ago. And that position just opened for applications in government jobs on Monday. And that application window closes on June 8th. I think as Director Lee was sharing, one of the biggest things that we're working through is the council action on May 7th. So on the technology side, we are preparing to issue an RFP for the public safety technology package that was directed by council on the 7th. I know the chief has formally reached out to the PAB and Director Lee to invite participation in shaping the procurement and evaluating the responses. That specific request to the board is that the PAB designate 2 members and the ODPA designate a member to serve as voting evaluators. And then additional members are welcome to attend the demos as observers. She had asked that those designees be sent to her no later than May 27th, and that will give us an opportunity to get everyone together and come up with the schedule for how everything is going to be planned out. Council took several actions at the meeting on the 7th. From the department side, the actions council directed are driving the RFP work that I just described, the referral of the community video stream acquisition report, and the surveillance use policy to the Public Safety Policy Committee for further review. And that I want to let you know, we anticipate going on June 2nd. And I know that those documents are before you guys tonight to work through. So we're working through our tracks respectively. On May 15th, the chief had shared with the PAB and the ODPA the proposed acquisition report and surveillance use policy that the department prepared for the investigative software platform. So that was what we had presented at the May 7th meeting, and that was specifically for Flock Nova. And as we're looking at that procurement, we went ahead and prepared the documents as though the requirements of the acquisition and the use of surveillance technology ordinance applied. And of note on that for your discussion, as we consider procuring any technology that arguably relates to the surveillance issues, we do an analysis of whether or not we believe the STO process applies, and that includes consultation with the city attorney's office. So we did that analysis and concluded that the STO didn't apply to the Flock Nova platform because it just aggregates data that the city already has access to from public sources and devices that have already gone through the STO process rather than collecting new surveillance data. So this function doesn't seem to be covered by the STO definition of surveillance technology, but since it's a novel case and council clearly indicated an interest in understanding the capabilities of the software and how it's used, as a showing of good faith and consistent with our commitment to maximum transparency, we prepared the acquisition report and use policy for the platform as though the STO did apply. So those drafts will be shared, and we also shared those with the city attorney. I wanted to acknowledge Chair Cayetano's email that was received a few days ago regarding policy 300 on our use of force, and all of the detail that you put into the spreadsheet outlining the proposed substantive differences that you were tracking from the current policy to the proposed policy. So I appreciate the thoroughness of the work. We're taking a careful look at that information and look forward to scheduling another meeting so that we can talk through those differences. And those are all the updates I have. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Deputy Chief. I definitely owe you an email on the meetings times. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Can you repeat what you said the status was of the community video stream?
Yeah,
Issue.
so we are going to the PSPC on June 2nd.
Okay, what are you gonna bring forward there?
So that's introducing basically what we need to do is bring the acquisition report to the PSPC so that it can be vetted a little bit more so that people can ask questions and understand the technology a little more.
Oh, are you making any modifications in response to some of the issues that we identified?
Yeah, everything that was referred to the city manager, we anticipate making sure that everything is addressed and updated.
Okay. Okay, and then I know we had some email back and forth, maybe you didn't see that I was involved, but it was just in terms of not the necessity to do the acquisition report vis-a-vis the surveillance platform, but rather the appropriateness of doing that before we've developed the functional requirements that will be included in an RFP. It feels a little bit like the cart before the horse. So if we don't have to do it at all, what does the department think about doing it later after the requirements have been established and included in the RFP? I just think there's some elements of it that actually speak to things that need to be fleshed out as part of the requirements process.
So this was something that we discussed with the city attorney's office as well. And speaking to the platform itself, the STO is a little ambiguous in that it's not actually ambiguous. It wants to have the name of whatever the technology is. And as we're working through the RFP process, what we're doing is we're calling out, this is the technology that we're interested in procuring. It's something like, for example, Flock Nova. So what we're hoping to do is open the RFP process for anyone who has technology similar to that, or the platform similar to that, to be able to bid on it. So it's a little challenging, and I think the chief had also shared an email with Chair Cayetano in asking and addressing those specific things. But by us calling out the technology, it is just saying this is what we're interested in, and it's as if the RFP is basically sorry, it's a little bit noisy here.
Yeah.
The determination was that we didn't have to go through the whole RFP process and then pick someone and then go through the acquisition and use policies. So this allows us to move forward, have people come through and share the different types of platforms that they have, and then for us to select the one that works.
Okay, so it sounds like you're not interested in postponing the acquisition report and policy. I think that's gonna be, when that item comes up, that's gonna be my recommendation, just because I think we should focus on the requirements first, because obviously in an RFP, I mean, I hope we wouldn't put, we want you to be able to do something similar to Flock Nova. We're gonna have to be able to delineate what we're actually looking for. So, I just personally feel like it's a bit premature to do the acquisition report now. But it's not because I want to hold up the process. I just think it's not in the right order. But that's my take on it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Deputy Chief, one question that I had, that I was hoping to ask the chief today. I don't know where she is on this question, because I think she's the person that I was hoping to interface with. But to me, and this is part of my conversation with the mayor, is that I think it would make a lot of sense. And also, I think I heard the council say this at the meeting, that We would like to see the RFP before it gets put out to bid. And I don't know if that's already what we were planning, what the department was planning. But I think that would be consistent with the spirit of what was discussed at the council and what was decided about including us in this process. And I think that it would also be consistent with previous, vendor selection process that we did, where I think the department drafted it, and then I was, there to look at it and be like, that makes sense to me, and report back to the board, and the board was able to, to be apprised of that as well. So I think that before the department issues that, we can work on your timeline, but I think it would be great that if we're able to see that before it goes out, so that we can get any feedback. Are you open to that? Or can you bring
I
back?
will absolutely carry that forward to the chief and discuss it with her tomorrow, and I can get back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I'll follow up over email as well, just so I can make sure that the city manager is in the loop as well, just so we're all on the same page. But I think that was my only question on that. So thank you for being here, and I definitely owe you an email on use of force. Director Lee just emailed me times when she's available, so I'll send you multiple emails forthcoming. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. All right, good night.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to agenda item 8, subcommittee reports.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll start with metrics and information just because we still have a vacancy on the policy review. But metrics and operations, I'm not sure if there's any additional updates, but I'll just start with the policy manual that we're still waiting for. The city attorney's office, due to competing priorities, had requested a small extension.
Okay,
So we should be hearing either by the end of this week or early next week. If there's anything else that they need us to look over.
okay.
But it's in the final stages.
Okay, that's great, and I just pulled the materials that I think were reviewed by council this week on the 27-28 budget. And reached out to the deputy city manager, and I think that we'll be able to meet on June the 11th. I'm not clear, if that's actually too late for us to, because we have a meeting June 17th.
The 3rd is really. Or we have a meeting on the 3rd.
I know, but then we have a meeting on the 17th, right?
Yeah.
And then the council is gonna be voting on the 27-28 budget when?
I believe the meeting after that's the 22nd or 23rd.
23rd. Okay. So I think we would need to be prepared to bring forward a recommendation for PAB comment on the budget for the meeting on the 17th. So that's the goal.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
Outreach and engagement, I know we have an item later on the agenda. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. And policies and practices on camping clearances?
No, but I did get an intern. So next time.
And finally, any reports from our liaisons?
Well, on the policy front, I guess I'm now liaison. Is that how we're categorizing it right now? Me and the department and the city, we have an item for that today, so I don't think I need to get into too much detail, but we're continuing to meet and we're doing it as expeditiously as we can to work through things, and I feel like with the back and forth, we're being productive. So, and also different council members have reached out to me and expressed interest in making sure that we're continuing to meet and moving things along. So that's the goal here. But we'll discuss more of the substance for the agenda item meeting.
Okay, great. Any additional reports?
The only other thing is that just as a general matter for subcommittees, we will probably in June at some point discuss subcommittee assignments, and I try to meet with all the board members individually to just get a sense of their interests and also understand we have things that come before us at certain times of the year, for example, budget, for example, the controlled equipment report and all these things. And so we have to organize that workflow as well. So I will probably be reaching out to individual board members to discuss the subcommittee so that we can make sure that we're on top of the different work in over the as the summer continues. That's the only other thing that I was going to add. Okay, great. Let's go to with that we'll go to agenda item 9A, which is a presentation by UC Berkeley Social Sector Solutions on recommended outreach strategies for the ARPA and PAB. Welcome, y'all. Thanks for being here. Do you have a preferred place where you want to sit or present?
Particular, we're happy to approach the podium.
Okay, sure, please.
And I'll be sharing our presentation, but just before we start, I do want to give a brief context as to what Social Sector Solutions and the project that they took on for our offices. Essentially, this is actually the work of a few years of our office trying to partner with UC Berkeley to get essentially assistance developing an outreach strategy and giving us a framework for us to implement both in the short and long term to help improve our strategy. This year, we were lucky enough to be selected as one of the projects that got to partner with Social Sector Solutions from UC Berkeley's School of Business to work on this project. So they helped us a semester develop, identify our strengths and weaknesses of our current outreach and our current capacity, and then ultimately develop the presentation that they'll be sharing with us today. There's a longer version, which is the one that's found in your packet that goes into more detail. And there'll be a future report that'll be coming from our office to the board about our response to the recommendations that are presented and the feasibility of it. So with that said, let me put this up on the screen.
Great.
And I'll put a timer up to help guide you off on 15 minutes.
Yeah, just for the board's awareness and public, so for structure, we're going to do 15 minutes of presentation and then board member questions for like 10 minutes ish, and then we'll have a discussion after that. So thank you for being here. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Hannah. Thanks so much for having me. So I wanted to start out. Oh, are this work?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to start out just by talking about the project context and our objectives. So our key question was, how can the ODPA strengthen community trust and engagement in Berkeley's police oversight system? And our work fell into two buckets. So the first was a strategic outreach plan, which Jose just talked about. And our second was a perception survey. We actually drafted this survey for the ODPA, and it can be deployed whenever the ODPA is ready. And these work streams are meant to be reinforcing as kind of a feedback loop. So we believe that as outreach improves, the longitudinal survey will be able to track the results of that in community police perceptions. Go to the next slide. So I just wanted to go over as a high level what we've been able to accomplish during this project. So at a high level, our project was guided by this key finding. We identified the barriers to community trust to include limited awareness, limited proactive engagement, and also limited visible coordination with the city and BPD. Through our interviews that we conducted, we found that few people knew what the ODPA did, and even fewer knew how to engage meaningfully with this institution. As a result, we developed a strategic capacity-aligned outreach plan, which was built to target these three pillars. And through our project, we tried to make it so our recommendations could actually be implemented by the ODPA. So we ended up developing a phased approach, and that prioritizes practical near-term actions while building towards longer-term institutional trust. Next, we wanted to make sure that our recommendations could be implemented as easily as possible. So we actually developed an implementation toolkit that the ODPA can use immediately. So these include website updates, process maps, FAQs, and social media guidance, so the ODPA could clearly communicate its role. And then in parallel, we created a pilot-ready longitudinal survey to track trust, awareness, and community experience over time within the community. Through our research, we found that few peer cities have a longitudinal survey instrument, and even fewer are able to link the results from that survey to policy changes. So we hope that with this longitudinal survey, the ODPA can be a leader in both Berkeley and also nationally. And then finally, with a strategic plan, implementation materials, and a survey instrument, We believe that the ODPA now has the capability to move from strategy to execution immediately. We go to the next slide. So next, I just wanted to go over quickly the methodology, which informed our longitudinal survey and also our outreach plan. So we conducted 10 interviews with community members spanning across city government, advocacy, and academia. We looked at 5 different peer oversight agencies, and we compared governance powers, population context, and outreach models. And we actually were able to interview staff members at these different agencies to identify transferable best practices. And then finally, when we were thinking about designing our longitudinal survey, we looked at 9 validated instruments from other cities, so we could see how are other people measuring police perceptions in their community and what can we take from them. Okay, and then go to the next slide. So next, I just wanted to outline what we were able to find from both our interviews and our research. So our first finding is this dual misconception that we talked to Jose a lot about. Community members are confused about the ODPA. They think that the ODPA is part of the police, and they also think that the ODPA is vehemently anti-police, and both of these undermine trust. Our next finding was that persistent PAB vacancies exacerbate this community frustration. Through our interviews, we heard about how there's always bad news when it comes to civilian oversight in Berkeley, and also that vacancies mean that your jobs are harder as you do your work, which makes it also harder to recruit new members. Next, we found that current outreach efforts do not consistently translate into meaningful community engagement. While reports and press releases increase awareness, we believe that events which increase community engagement, such as focus groups or listening sessions, could be held more often. And then next, we found missed opportunities for collaboration with city leadership. Through our interviews, we were able to interview the mayor and a member of the BPD, and we found that there's a need and also a want to collaborate more. And then finally, we found that few cities track police perceptions over time, which creates an opportunity for the ODPA to lead within the city of Berkeley and also nationally. So now I'll just go into our strategic outreach plan that we created. So from our interviews and from our research, we outlined a 3-pillar strategic outreach plan, and they correspond to the 3 barriers that we outlined. So the first is awareness and understanding. We believe that the ODPA can work to clarify its role and also work with the PAB to clarify its complaint and commendation processes. The next is proactive engagement. We've constantly heard in our interviews that the PAB and the ODPA need to go into the community and do outreach rather than waiting for the community to come to them. And then the third pillar is visible collaboration. We believe that through building a collaborative relationship with both BPD and the city, the ODPA and PAB can be more efficient. And we know that these changes can't be done overnight. So we settled on a phased implementation, short-term plan 2026, medium 2026 to 2029, ultimately building up to a North Star, which is 2030 and beyond. And then next, I'll go into detail into each pillar. So pillar 1 is awareness and understanding, and the goal is to make ODPA's role, authority, and complaint process clear and accessible. So in the short term, we believe that the ODPA can implement the process maps and FAQs that we've created. So a community member can go on the website and understand the role and also the complaint and commendation processes. In the medium term, we believe that the ODPA can share plain language updates on annual reports, complaint trends, and policy reviews via public channels. We know that a lot of work already goes into the annual reports, and we think that it can be leveraged to increase awareness. And then finally, we believe that ODPA should move to the North Star, which is public transparency dashboards for policy reviews. And on the right-hand side, you can see examples from peer cities that we studied and also interviewed that have already implemented these recommendations that we believe the ODPA can learn from and also follow. Sally's gonna take it away for the next part.
All right, thank you, Anna. So as she said, my name is Savi. I'd like to pick up where Anna left off on the second pillar here. We learned from our peer interviews and the research that we've done that awareness, the first pillar, is simply not enough. Although you can distribute info efficiently to your community, it's really important to create consistent, meaningful, two-way engagement with your community members. And so this is where the second pillar comes in of proactive engagement. How can we strengthen proactive outreach to increase awareness, participation, and trust from our community? And so we had some recommendations here to kick us off to discuss how we can better strengthen that outreach. In the short term, we wanted to start with building an annual calendar of priority community events to plan staffing in advance. This really reinforces a proactive versus reactive approach, allowing us to engage the community meaningfully with existing community events. Solana Stroll being the biggest one of those. We identified this as a high impact opportunity from our research, since it's the largest annual community event where it essentially creates visibility with a broad cross section of Berkeley residents. We recognize there's other outreach that happens, some of our Juneteenth programming, there's also programming in the broader city around Berkeley High School and so on. But building an annual calendar of these events really allows us to take a proactive approach. We'll see lessons here on the right from peer and aspirational cities where there are examples that are out there, where there are consistent, geographically diverse calendar of outreach events and webinars that really help promote some of this engagement we're talking about here. In the long term, we'd really like to look into hosting public events that encourage community feedback, things like resource fairs, town halls, on relevant public safety issues, and so on. Here, we found through our interviews and studies that community engagement is often more effective when you meet the community where they are, and these are examples of events that promote that. We have some examples here of Akron and Eugene, which host similar events that have found extraordinary results through the process. And then finally, our North Star, our long-term goal, which is establishing a community engagement analyst role and a police accountability youth council. We call this our moonshot goal, we call this our North Star, but we still mention it for a reason, which is that dedicated infrastructure has time and again proven effective in different cities in our research. We found that sustained engagement needs a dedicated ownership and staffing model. And so when we see examples in Cleveland and Eugene and in New York City, we find examples of that working in the long term. Overall, what's important to note with proactive engagement is that community engagement is not simply about the communications that happen from the office, but rather about the broader trust building process we hope to achieve. And then finally, if we move to the next slide here, we can discuss the third pillar, which Hannah mentioned before, which is visible collaboration with BPD in the city. Through our research, we found that residents often interpret visible conflict between oversight and police departments as ineffective systems. And so being able to learn from these interviews across community members, peer oversight committees, and public sector individuals, we really were able to learn that visible collaboration with BPD in the city can really help us establish our goals. The goal here, to be clear, is not to reduce independence, but rather strengthen public confidence in a broader oversight system. And here we have our short-term and medium-term goal to help us achieve this. So first, I wanted to mention strengthening our internal working relationship with BPD and City Council. What this essentially means is that we want to build the communications behind the scenes and help promote and produce policy implementations and recommendations here. To do so, we have an example of a city that partnered with police department, their local police department, to fund police trainings after policy review findings. We also noted the increased visibility of complement and officer feature, essentially a feature which allows us to place it next to the complaints channel on ODPA and PAB websites, which brings balance to system accountability. So when you bring system accountability, you're also bringing positive acknowledgement to the system, balancing them both together. We find examples in our research from Alexandria, Akron, and Cleveland that feature these commendation forms directly next to complaint forms on their homepage. Longer term, medium term here, we hope to build an infrastructure where we can co-share city wins through owned and shared media opportunities. Again, the idea here being able to build public trust through visible collaboration between these departments. We have examples of Cleveland and Spokane using earned media to feature the accountability office's work alongside the contributions of the PD and the mayor. And the real takeaway here from this slide is that accountability and collaboration are not mutually exclusive. Communities benefit when oversight city leaders and public safety stakeholders are all working towards this goal of shared public trust and being able to build towards community safety. With that, after talking some time about the strategic outreach plan and the pillars here we mentioned, I'd love for us to transition into the longitudinal survey, the second part of our project and what we worked on here. And so if we transition here, our 4 papers, we now are happy to say that is at the outcome of our project is that the ODPA now has a defined path to launch a principal annual mixed mode longitudinal community survey. That is a lot of words that I said there, and I will break them down one by one here. First, the survey topics that we helped identify at the beginning of our project have now been transformed into a stable core instrument. What that means is that we have a survey with a consistent line of questions that can be measured over a period of time. And the survey that we built and produced the ODPA focuses on the highest value longitudinal domains: trust, accountability, ODPA awareness, procedural justice, direct experiences, public safety, and equity. With these survey topics, we have also built measurement systems to convert these qualitative concepts into quantitative indices and being able to interpret those indices using a high-level codebook and index framework. So now these core items can be fed into these indices that we can use to track over time with data. We've helped do some digging on some options, so provide more due diligence on what it would take next steps to really implement the survey. But at the end of the day, what we're really excited to share is that the work that we've done here really helps support both ODPA's needs and Berkeley's broader survey capability. What is fantastic about building this longitudinal survey is it really serves as not just ODPA's first longitudinal measurement tool, it creates a repeatable model for community survey practice across the city. And so we're really excited to say that the project is not just simply why do we need to do a survey, but a concrete implementation package. And so with that, we'll actually be able to dive into some of the key concepts of this survey. The next slide. So here's some examples we have here on key survey topics, design, and implementation. The key survey topics, as I mentioned in the previous slide, are listed here in trust, accountability, awareness, justice, direct experiences, public safety, and equity. What is interesting is the design and how we set up the survey. We've built a stable annual core module, which is that for each of these survey topics, we built 2 to 3 questions that are meant to be repeatedly deployed over a period of time to your residents. We also included rotating modules for emerging issues. For example, at the beginning of this meeting, there was discussion around flock. We have an example of that in the mock survey that we built to shared committee here. And so being able to use this standardized survey deployed over time with updated and emerging issues really allows you to measure sentiment accurately. We also have standardized Likert scale statements for consistency. What that simply means is strongly agree, neutral, strongly disagree, disagree. You'll see some examples of those statements on the next slide here. But we use these statements to build these composite indices I talked to you about, and the codebook. Last year's note is the implementation. So we hope that this survey becomes an annual cross-sectional survey, targets around 600 to 800 Berkeley residents, demographically weighted, and involves panel-based sampling, which includes targeted and repeated outreach over the years. We hope that it's an 8 to 10 minute survey optimized for completion, and that we can use the data from these surveys to build public dashboards to track and communicate these trends. All these factors are important for implementation so that they can be statistically significant and we can use them to actually make solid interpretations of the data. I'd like to transition at this point to sharing some of the questions on this survey for the folks here to review live. So we have some examples for trust and confidence in police. We have sample statements listed, such as I trust the police department, or I'm confident that the BPD acts in the best interest of the community. For accountability and oversight, we have examples like oversight bodies are effective at holding the police accountable, and officers who violate policies are often held responsible. For procedural justice and fair treatment, we have examples here, such as police treat people with respect, and police make decisions fairly. For public safety and community experience, we have examples such as how safe do you feel in the city of Berkeley as a whole? This one has a modification of a Likert statement. So instead of strongly disagree to strongly agree, it's very unsafe to very safe. And then we have a yes, no question as an example of variation, which is in the past 12 months, did you contact BPD for help or to report crime? Last section here being equity and fairness across communities. We have some example statements here for you. Police treat people of all races and ethnicities equally, and police provide the same level of service across all neighborhoods. Essentially, the reason I wanted to share these with you live is just to show that standardized survey questions can help enable those consistent longitudinal measurement and framed in the right way. And so with that, now that we've covered the longitudinal survey and the outreach feedback, I'll hand it back over to Hannah to close us out for our presentation.
So, as briefly mentioned earlier, we believe that the two work streams that we worked on, the outreach strategy and the longitudinal survey, create a feedback loop which measure, refine, and strengthen community trust over time. So as outreach improves, the longitudinal survey will be able to measure that impact and justify future outreach efforts. In the short term, we believe that the ODPA can deploy core tools, which we've helped design, such as FAQs, process maps, website updates, pilot proactive engagement, such as focus groups and listening sessions, and then finally strengthen collaboration with the city and PPD. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and present.
Thank you so much. Great job. I think we're gonna go to board member questions. I also just want to thank first both of you for being here.
Cool.
You can sit if you want. You don't have to sit.
Yeah.
I think we're always so lucky to have Berkeley students and to draw on, like, y'all did a great job. So, okay, board member questions. I have a few, but I want to open it up to you and even the director's office if there are any.
I know there was a lot of documents that were mentioned, we're cleaning those up for y'all.
Great.
And giving y'all an implementation plan at a later date, but just wanted to acknowledge that.
I have some questions, and also for ODPA, it's more about then assuming you've had a chance to meet with the team or discuss this before it came here. Just what your, I'm interested in your reaction, but let me ask a few questions. I thought it was really well done. In terms of the 10 people though, how many of these folks were just actual, Berkeley residents, not affiliated with government? I guess academics can be Berkeley residents, but I'm thinking about non-academics, non-government employees. How many of the 10 would fall in that?
Yeah, so I think most of the people we interviewed either served on the PRC before, or worked in city government. But I'm thinking of at least one person that wasn't involved but did have an interest in the PAB.
Okay, because I think that's something just, when we've talked about community engagement in the past, that's kind of the group we've been really focused on. And so that's just something I think I'm observing about this. In terms of the survey, I love the idea of a survey. I see this being highly challenging to implement because politically, right, we are sort of asking questions about how the department is functioning and people's perception of the police, which is not exactly, I think the argument would be that's not our role. I really agree with your comment about collaboration is not have to run counter to independent oversight because, right, everybody should be interested in the answers to these questions. But I just want to make the comment that I think this would be very challenging. On a technical matter though, a technical front, did you think about just having a link to the survey up at all times on, say, the ODPA website? So you're not getting the sampling and all of that, but you could conceivably get more responses. I don't know, it's just kind of like a live constant data collection tool. Did you think about that?
That's a really great point, and there's several ways for us to deploy a survey. Opt-in method, to your point, is one of those where we just let it release. What gets hard for us though is to measure longitudinally in terms of how you want to statistically deploy the survey. If we panel select the group of 600 to 800 and measure them over time, it helps eliminate some of the other confounding factors that come, because if we don't equally weight accordingly by demographics, for example, then the data you end up getting is different than what we would typically expect from a survey like this. It doesn't really give you an accurate measurement of your population as a whole.
Mhm.
You want to statistically select and sample your Berkeley residents as opposed to an opt-in method, which there are factors as to who has the access to the website and internet and who can opt in to some of these survey experiences based on their time and so on.
Yeah, it just might be, like practically in your, it's not the North Star, but it might be something on a short-term basis that's more viable.
We actually recommend as part of our strategic outreach plan, that's where some of these conversations become helpful. So when you table or you set up for the outreach events at Solano Stroll, for example, engaging your community with these questions is another quick fire way, for example, to start engaging on these topics and getting meaningful answers. So hosting a version of the survey as people come visit you, you meet them where they're at to help answer those questions. It doesn't necessarily lead to the longitudinal survey, but it does help sample and better understand public sentiment to a less rigid degree.
Okay, and then my last question is just on overall metrics. So again, and I really want to recognize and appreciate the former director because he's been pushing this. I know he's instrumental in getting you guys on board and definitely, I know was very committed to this work. So I want to recognize Hansel. But also one of the challenges that I've had with it is I know we need to do it, but how do we determine that we are being successful? Did you guys talk at all about any kind of metrics for community engagement?
Yeah, so we looked at a bunch of metrics. I think
I have some, so the indices are really a good example of doing metrics in terms of measuring growth over time. So we said if we could measure on these metrics that we use in the survey, for example, if we could qualitatively say how many individuals, when we conduct a survey, because the loop feeds into each other, how many people are aware of what the ODPA is. If we notice the awareness metric, the ODPA awareness and role clarity index move up accordingly, it means that the outreach that we're doing is effective. The survey essentially measures the outreach, and then the survey helps feed into our outreach efforts, which then feeds back into the survey.
Okay, so not other metrics like social media follow, because we really don't have a social media presence at all right now, or
Yeah.
real one.
I think outside of the survey, we also talked about how many people are meaningfully engaging with the ODPA. So how many people are like coming to meetings, or like how many people are talking to you at the Solano Stroll, or filling out like a short survey at the Solano Stroll. And we also, yeah, I think that's what.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Essentially, people engagement metrics.
Okay. Those are the questions.
Please, board member.
Well, I want to share the experience we've had at Berkeley High with the Law and Social Justice Program. Initially, when it was first proposed, there was a real pushback from the school board directors about doing it. And when we set it up, it's called Law and Social Justice. And it's a partnership with Berkeley Police Department and the Public Defender's Office participates and so forth. Over the years, the program has existed. It's one of the most popular at Berkeley High, by the way. And it has a connection with Berkeley City College. In other words, kids will go to Berkeley City College for some classes that are connected to the program. And they do things, some of which I think are not great, but that's my opinion, like visiting San Quentin. But of course, everybody likes to go to San Quentin. But what we found over the years is that the connection between the department and the students changed the attitudes on both sides. Students' view of the police department changed quite a bit. And the police actually became, I don't know what the word is, more comfortable with working with the high school and working with students. And we've had a series of remarkable officers who work at the high school. But that direct connection between the students and the police department where they come and talk to the classes. Kids visit the dispatch center, they do ride-alongs and so forth. Had a remarkable effect on attitudes on both sides. I would like to see in some of whatever we decide on, some reflection of that process. The direct connection between the department and the community changes attitudes on both sides. And, you know, and obviously with the ODPA, but anyway, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions for?
I have a few. So one is on the key question. So was this from Hansel or was this, what was the source of the key question that kind of informed this work?
So the key question actually developed over time as both staffing and resources changed for our office. The key question originally started as a more broader outreach, like how can we, and I might be mischaracterizing what we had in our initial application. It was strictly focused on the longitudinal survey. But as we started talking about, okay, like these are the resources we have, this is the fiscal reality of the city. Let's start small and then work our way into creating something that's going to have a more long-term meaningful impact as the years go by and as we become more efficient with our resources. So the longitudinal survey, and the reason it's a pilot, not necessarily the implementation, is because it's supposed to give us a starting point for us to implement it. The questions themselves aren't finalized, to the vice chair's point about the political feasibility of the survey as present. It had even been envisioned that this would be one of those projects that we collaborate on together as a broader public safety measure for the city or a bigger project. So it's really just the way this question was developed is like, what can we do now to set ourselves up for the future?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I guess it appears to me when I look at that, I'm not sure what the problem is that we're necessarily trying to solve for. So,
Sorry, do you have questions for them? I just, we'll have time to provide our own discussion. I just want to make clear.
well, I guess kind of working backwards from that, it seems to me that some of the longitudinal survey questions may or may not get us closer to the key question and assessing to what extent we are or aren't moving the needle on meaningfully solving that key question. So it would seem to me, for example, like equity and fairness, to the extent that the needle is moving on how police treat people, there could be, it seems, yeah, that, I mean, that how people answer that could be informed by any number of events, perhaps totally outside of Berkeley's control or our control. So I don't know how much that again gets back to that key question. I do think that the accountability and oversight question and just the questions in general about the PAB and ODPA, it would be very useful to track those over time, so we just have a better sense as to what the community thinks of us. I suppose I'll leave it there.
I have a few questions. Thanks for presenting. First is, can you tell me more about the youth council and how that functions? I'd be interested in what sort of analogous process. We have a lot of schools here in the area, and a lot of interested youth.
Yeah, so the example that we were thinking of was New York City. So they bring youth, the youth apply who might be interested, and for an entire day, they bring the youth council in and they have presentations on the police accountability oversight agency in New York City, and they talk about these various issues and get input from the youth.
Oh, so it's a one-day event. It's not like they're attached to some sort of function of the oversight.
No, it's just they bring everyone together once a year. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then another question that I had is, did you identify in your research any structural barriers to your goals? So for example, budget is out of our control. So I think structural barriers, I think things that are outside of our immediate control, that require us to work with different stakeholders. Like having a dedicated person to do that, that's a, you know, the structural barrier is the budget. But I'm just curious if you have any other, if you identified any other structural barriers, because those require like more sustained effort to be able to change.
There's a couple I think we identified as part of the project. So one is, to your point, we also recognize the silos in which departments sometimes tend to work in. So recognize that if we wanted to, for example, work on the survey questions, we'd have to get buy-on from several departments to make sure that everyone's aligned on the wording and messaging. Second was on the strategic outreach. We saw a dual-sided structural barrier. One is from our side in terms of, again, that cross-communication budget to actually go and table and staff these events. But we also recognize on the other end, sometimes the community members we want to hear from the most might be the hardest to reach out to as well, because of their own structural barriers to access to these information. So meeting the community where they're at really means trying to understand where are those who are most marginalized and how can we best reach them with our strategic plan. So those were some examples, and I'm curious if you have.
Yeah. Also just throughout, we thought about budget and staffing, as some of the key constraints. And that's why we settled on the short term, medium term. And whenever we had a recommendation, we tried to create something that would help you implement that recommendation. So for example, with the process maps and FAQs, like you could deploy that onto your website like today. So yeah, it was always on our mind, and we had a lot of conversations with Jose, asking him like, do you think this is feasible? Like, if not, like, do you have any other suggestions?
I think the vice chair's point about being able to get enough people, stakeholders in the city to project our survey is a good one, because there are it's a political question at the end of the day. And you know, once we recognize that as a structural barrier, one thing that we do in the legal field is we pay people to do focus groups. And you know, those people are people who maybe they're the ones who wouldn't otherwise come, who wouldn't otherwise show up, but they are the people who are most effective. And I think that might be another option for us to think about. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm really glad you mentioned it. You teed this up very well, which is that in the longer portion of this presentation, you'll find that we have some implementation recommendations and vendor partnerships that you can explore that in fact do help manage the panel fielding, deployment, and management of data after. So to your concern, they actually go identify members, offer incentives where applicable, and help gather and measure your data over time.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't talking about vendors. I was talking more about, you know, for like when we are about to go to trial, we pay a jury to come, and we get their reactions to what our case is about. And I can imagine like us doing something similar with outreach in Berkeley, where if we are interested in what people actually think, we just ask them to sit in a room for a day and like get their opinions. Because you know, it's, for example, the issue with Google reviews. You either get people who really hate the restaurant, or you get people who are incentivizing only 5-star reviews. You get people who are interested. So how do you get those people involved? Anyway, that's sort of like what I think about. One question that I had is, did you in your interviews or research come across the issue where people in Berkeley cannot distinguish between ODPA and the PAB? And what, if anything, does your like, you know, how do your goals help sort of like, you know, feed information into the public about our respective goals and our different bodies and duties and things like that?
Yeah, so in our interviews, we heard that a lot, especially from former PRC members, also from academics in Berkeley. And we think, so we created an FAQ for you, and a lot of the questions are, what is the difference between these different agencies in Berkeley? And we think that by making that more clear, and then also we have website recommendations. So currently, when you search police accountability in Berkeley, you get the PAB website, and then you also get a police accountability website, which is for the ODPA. So we think that different recommendations that we suggest can make that distinction more clear.
Thank you. I think the last thing is that I think the questions, I think this is what Board Member Boswell-Charco is getting at. I think the questions are kind of geared toward like how do people feel about the police versus how do people feel about the work that we're doing? I mean, like maybe the work that we're doing has collateral effects or downstream effects on how people view the police, but I think, we always struggle with how do we gauge how we're doing as well. And so I would be interested in seeing if you have questions that could be more geared toward the work that we do as well. And we can implement those and see the best level. Thank you for coming and presenting to us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
well
great,
done.
great work, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Can we spend like just 5 minutes hearing from staff what their impressions are and feasibility? I wanted to say when we talked about barriers, I kind of laughed when you said, improve UX. That was one of the recommendations.
Yeah,
Like talk about infeasible.
Yeah, sure.
Then the entire city website. Like a major UX overhaul. But anyway, so staff, what were your impressions and what do you think we can actually do?
I think, as I noted, I'll have a more detailed reporting out on the specific recommendations, but one of the great things about working with the team is that I got to give them feedback in real time about what was realistic, what was realistic, what might be a big political barrier, or not essential, but a big barrier, or what we had tried before that didn't necessarily work out and the reasons why it didn't work. I think the website, just because it's fresh, those recommendations were actually feasible because they're changes to sections that we actually have control over. And there's some things like, for example, the commendations one, where as soon as I heard that, I was just like, that's such a basic thing. Like, why was that not done sooner? So those are the recommendations. I think short term, everything in the short term is pretty feasible for us. For the medium and long term, in terms of one, for example, the survey, that's going to take some work in terms of not just within our office, but across the city. To your point, I think today there's only really a small snippet of some of the questions, but there's a long version of this that has a variety of questions. And one of the requirements was actually being able to break out the sections and do them individually. So if we wanted to do more ODPA focus, that's something we could do. If you were more interested in a broader public safety, that's something that could be easily tailored. So it's not fixed to those points. So with, again, the biggest barrier realistically is the budget. But I think the recommendations were set in a way to where we could work towards it at a future date. I always think of the communication specialist as what the former director and I would always refer to. It was something that council had envisioned at one point, but as the budget situation changed, the funding for that got postponed to eventually where the idea was just not carried through as more of just the budget barrier.
Okay.
So again, more detailed report forthcoming, but in terms of just the broader response, the recommendations here were feasible or we're able to work towards them.
Okay.
I'll just say, coming in on the very end, it was just great to see this finished product, and I appreciate all your work. I think that really the biggest barrier is budgetary, being able to meet people to do this work, so. But I think, Jose and I can talk about what are some of the smaller things that we could do and look towards, and I agree with that, having the ability to come in and complement an officer. Be good. Yes.
I'll just add in as well, like from someone who talks a lot with members of the public who are trying to navigate what we do, what they're supposed to tell us, and who we are. I would say I get asked if we are the police once a week, once every other week, of people thinking that we are the police department, whether it's to report a crime or to file something with internal affairs or something where they actually do want to submit a complaint but still think we are the police. Or again, I don't understand what it means for them to even submit something. We have some of the process laid out, but I think some of the materials like the process map and the FAQs can hopefully help make it easier to understand, easier to read those things. And so I think just even those quick things are feasible. And I hope we would see good results with that. We get calls from many people, who never interact with us all the time, and they pretty regularly don't understand what we do, which means that's an us problem. So it's noticeable, and I hope
Thanks.
I like the idea of a youth council. I think that it's a good long-term goal. I think that we have a lot of we have a lot of engaged students in Berkeley and also a lot of teachers and educators who are interested in this kind of stuff. So if there's a way for us to build that out, I'm interested. In terms of actions, I don't for this particular item, I think there's two things that I'm tracking. One is, do we Jose, do we have a outreach and engagement committee right now? Who's on it?
It's Board Member Wells and Board Member Strickland.
Okay, is that part of the combination? Is that
Yeah.
wrapped into the combinations? Oh, okay. So if there's anything from this list that you want to turn into an action item for the board's perspective, then feel free to bring it back. There's not really an action side of that. Okay. The second thing is, I do think that, as I mentioned at my comments, I think we should discuss for one of the outreach and engagement pieces is working with the city council on a direct search for the director. And if there's anyone who is interested in joining that Friday, July 17, full day first pass interview with the subcommittee of 3 from the council. I feel like you should email both me and Director Lee. I don't think that there's anything really to vote on, but I think that if there's anyone who has a comment on the process, and please feel free to weigh in right now. But I think my suggestion is that if you're interested, just email me and Director Lee so we can help coordinate. We will need to vote, I think, on an official representative. I don't think we need to do it today. I think we should do it at the next meeting, maybe. I actually don't know exactly how to structure it, if there's any suggestions.
I don't understand how they're addressing this right now. Is this part of this agenda item?
It's part of outreach and engagement.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're taking
yeah,
a liberal view.
liberal view.
Okay. So it sounds like we should put on the agenda for the 3rd or the 17th
Yeah,
to add, create like, I guess, liaisons for the hire.
yes,
Okay.
let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks, Master. That's why you're here. Okay, thank you again for presenting. I thought, I wish I had your presentation skills. That would be.
Yeah, you guys were great.
I would be maybe more effective at my job. Don't laugh too hard. Okay, let's go on to agenda item 9B, which I believe is your item.
Oh, okay.
Accommodations.
I mean, I think this can be pretty quick. So the last meeting, we had, I think, essentially all the accommodations that had been received by the PAB going back into 2025. I think for the backup of 2025, but Jose can correct me. And then coming out of that, there was, it was a little bit kind of overwhelming as far as whether everyone would receive accommodation or kind of what the process would be. So coming out of that, there was a directive to kind of, comb through all that information and come back with an official recommendation as far as who should receive accommodations. So that's what I did with this, with the input of Board Member Wells. So it was just kind of combing through all the various accommodations, accounting for where there were officers who have been recognized numerous times, and then cross-referencing it to kind of like the framework that we have as far as like, what kind of criteria rises to the level of accommodation. So I put that together, it's here, and that's, I would urge a vote.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments from board members?
I want to look for, because as you know, we did an exercise. Did you do a crosswalk?
I think that's the case.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, well, Now I feel subject to deep peer pressure. So, unfortunately, what happened is that the chair and I also went through and came up with some recommendations, which we hope to share and integrate with yours
Oh.
in a graceful manner. And it actually didn't happen. You could see it's totally ungraceful. And I'm trying to look at yours against ours. So I don't know. I just worried that
So we can do
there
this-
were some that were really amazing.
We can do it iteratively, where we bring it back at the next meeting and it's,
Okay, that's a great idea.
yeah, so like, we don't have to do,
Let's-
this is not. a-
Let's move yours
Yeah.
and then we can do the crosswalk and see if they're working. Because I think our list was actually longer. We had more officers that we were gonna commend.
Okay,
And I also don't think you did it here. You mentioned it, but I don't think you did it explicitly. I did want to kind of formally recognize those officers with multiple commendations because it does tell you something. And so that's good idea though. I vote to move your item.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess also just, and that's fine, as far as a process for the future, it was a little bit, I kind of, it's, I could I have shared this, or could I have sent this to you to be distributed to the board ahead of the vote, or would that have like triggered some?
If it would pause the forum to discuss it or whatever.
Yeah,
The way you did it was good. Like,
okay,
it's not on you.
okay,
Like, you're, this is all great.
okay,
It's not, has nothing
We
to do-
just should have maybe said, oh, we're gonna have a process where two of us are also gonna look at it. And then we'll bring two lists.
so I think in
You know,
the
we did-
future, yeah, so in the future, I think we should just be explicit, like, other folks who have recommendations should just send them to me by like X date, and
That's
then
good.
I'll incorporate by Y date, and then bring it.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't think every, sometimes we might need to discuss, but
Yeah,
here we are. And I also think, this is to Vice Chair Wilson's point that we can have this be like a more steady stream
mhm,
so that we're not like backlogged. And I think we're working ahead of the backlog right now because, next meeting, we can bring our, like the delta between yours and ours.
right,
And then we can keep working on these.
right, although some of the, I mean, it's contingent on when we get accommodations from BPD.
Yeah, so
Yeah, but
let's,
we were really behind this.
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah,
Obviously.
yeah,
yeah.
really bad.
So we have a motion on the floor. I'll second the motion. Let's take a vote.
Okay, so the motion is to move to approve the recommendation as presented. The motion was made by Vice Chair Wilson, seconded by Chair Cayetano. I'll proceed to the roll call though. Board Member Bozo Charco.
Yes.
Board Member Allen,
Yes,
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Cayetano.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, great, everyone. Thank you for that. Thank you, Board Member Bozo Charco, for bringing this to us. We're gonna go now to item 9C, and for this item, I submitted a supplemental, but also I invited a distinguished former, I believe PRC chair. Is that right? You were also chair, also distinguished use of force expert, vice president of NACL, many other things that I'm not gonna read here for the sake of brevity, but George Perez Velez to present for 15 minutes. I think, most relevant to this discussion is former Chair Perez Velez was a member of the PRC during the use of force revisions and discussions that were brought to council in 2020, which is sort of the initial foundation of what we're going to be discussing in the near future. And I think that I've been trying to reach out to different PRC members who have had experience and who know the history and who also, are use of force experts. And all of them have pointed to former Chair Brad Velez as the guy to come speak to us today. So I hope that everyone is just as attentive to this as I am, because there's a lot of honestly, a lot of history and a lot of tough substantive things to chew on. But I'm grateful that we have him here. So with that, George, whenever you're ready.
Since my presentation skills are not as good as they been so there before, I'm assuming that I can sit here, that's the podium, it's my kryptonite.
Sit.
It has always been my kryptonite.
I'm gonna keep track of the time just for the sake, but you can sit wherever you like.
Yeah, so, but thank you for having me here, I'm a firm believer, supporter of your work. I do have to have some caveat, statements that I have to make before I do the presentation. I am not speaking on behalf of the police office of the police ombuds for the city of Spokane. I am not speaking on behalf of NACO, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Bay Area Rapid Transit, Civilian Review Board. Those three agencies that I'm a member of are not what I'm representing today. They would be happy to hear that I said that on the record. Having said that, I am here as someone who's probably interim director Lee can probably say yes or no to this. Probably the second or third longest serving member of the PRC. I served for 14 years. And 8 years of those, I was the chair of the PRC. 6 years, I was either a vice chair, one top of the other, or just a member of the board. Additionally to that, for 7 years, I was the chair of the Lexical Subcommittee, who reviewed all the policies for the Berkeley Police Department, with the exception of the use of force policy, which was always taken out of the equation. And as the chair so stated, I was the chair of the use of force policy during the 2020 review that was presented to City Council for their ultimate vote. My presentation today, which it's based on 3 major points that the chair wanted me to discuss. Just a little bit on the history behind it, how we got to the presentation, what were the mechanisms that instructed us to do the review. Second, a little bit of what participation happened, what kind of community outreach was done. And third, some of the concerns that were given by the police department at that time. And I think they're quite critical now because some of the concerns that were expressed in 2020 to 2021 are some concerns that are being expressed right now. Particularly those related to proportionality and the standard, which is quite important. I'm assuming who's flipping from the next, I'm not doing it.
It got flipped.
Thank you.
It's a little bigger. Sorry.
You have
You have
to
it.
here.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, you got it.
So just as a background, 2014 with the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and the review of the use of force policy was starting to be the discussion within the city of Berkeley. At the same time that we were discussing crowd control and crowd management policy, as well as de-escalation and body worn cameras. The use of force policy was a pivot there, but that was, again, as I said, because Lexical the Lexical subcommittee was not looking at the use of force policy. We put that to the side and addressed the other concerns. Then, of course, we had the 2020 demonstrations. We also generated some concerns related to crowd control and management, as well as the use of force. That was a little bit of a pivot of why we were finally being able to address these concerns. It is important to note that in some of the directives and memos from the city, from the city council to the directive of the PRC, at one time or the other, the direction was for the police department to review the use of force policy that was completely taken out, and the directive was for the PRC itself to engage the community with all stakeholders, which the police department and the unions were members of, into the review of the use of force policy. I'll say something here that we said at the end of this process. Former chair of the PAB and chair of the PRC, Northern District Attorney General Easy Ramsey, which I believe will give you some support of testimony later on. When we presented this to City Council, we were quite adamant on the fact that we were grateful that the department rose up to the occasion and participated in this process in a collaborative manner, understanding that they understood the seriousness of the situation and the pressures, as well as the moment that was given the impetus for the review of the use of force policy. And again, I will paraphrase a little bit of this. Because I know there's a concern related to AB 392, which we took into consideration completely. Particularly because that standard was the necessary standard, but not really associated to a use of force completely. But in incidents in which deadly force is used or death in custody. So that was incorporated as well as training and other obligations under the law. So that was incorporated as well within the use of force policy. I know there has been some argument related to where we took care of that it needed to be updated because AB 392 was not taken into consideration. Unfortunately, that statement might not be accurate, since it was part of our conversations. One of the pivots here, again, and I mentioned it on my presentation, was the 8 and weight, which stipulated some certain center benchmarks for policies to be evaluated. One of them was sanctity of life, which is also a concern, which in the new policy that's been presented by the Berkeley Police Department, that is taken out completely. Again, the PRC engaged all stakeholders, city managers, the attorney, the police department, the union, as well as representatives of the ACLU and the NAACP. And of course, all these meetings happened virtually. And we had quite a lot of presence at those meetings because people were able to engage during that period of time. I have the URL here for the 23rd included, so you folks can know where a lot of these conversations came from. The subcommittee convened 7 times for a period of 2.5 weeks, and I have to say kudos to interim Director Lee for being able to finagle all the logistics of doing Zoom calls when it was brand new and no one knew how to really use it. Part of this subcommittee had the unions were present, the chief was present, command staff was present, city attorney was present, city manager was present. So all these conversations did not happen in a vacuum because oversight can't happen in a vacuum. Every single stakeholder that have given the input at that time of the legality of the issue, or the operational concerns of the issue, or even the risk assessment issue, were present to supply this information. And they were present to every single aspect of those deliberations. And I put here the city attorney, Fatima Brown, and the city attorney were present to provide legal guidance. And no flags were presented at the time of the presentations, even in the collaborative back and forth discussion of certain items in the use of force policy. After the use of force subcommittee voted for this to be approved and to be forwarded to the Police Review Commission totality, we had 2 additional in which public comment was looked for. The police department was there, the union was there, the city attorney was there, the city manager representative was there. And I reiterate this to make sure that we understand how this process happened. And that it was quite collaborative, and every single stakeholder at all different levels of the city of Berkeley were present, which is something which is a little bit different on how the policy is getting reviewed now. And again, several revisions were made that address specific recommendations. In all meetings, all stakeholders had the ability to opine. When we had deliberations of certain aspects of the use of force policy, we got the input from the police department and for the union. Ultimately, it was a decision of the members subcommittee to vote on items on the agenda, but we did look for the input and we consider it. I put in my presentation that you see in some aspects where there's a may, a shall, a should, particularly in an aspect of de-escalation. That is a compromise in a conversation with the police department of whether may was the recommendation of lexible, and the community wanted shall, the department said it's a little bit too specific, and we go from a mandate to a suggestion that can be articulable, why not? So we added should. That's just a perfect example of items and places within the use of force policy in which the department was had the opportunity to collaborate and change language. So all in all, I mean, there's a memo from then city manager D. Williams and with the city attorney in which there was a meet and confer that happened at the time with the union and the police department. So before it went to city council, all this was vetted. The next slide, please. I have to move money. So in terms of the immediate concerns on policy changes and benchmarking, I looked back to the concerns that were expressed by the then chief Greenwood, and he said SER is higher than constitutional or reasonable. Minimal force is operationally subjective. Proportionality adds post hoc balancing ambiguity. How do the hindsight being 2020, how police officers can objectively or reasonably be expected to make a decision at a time. And in my communications with Chief Greenwood at the time, the conversations were not in outright opposition to the changes of the policy, but more concerned about implementation, training, and operational feasibility. As a benchmark, if we're doing this benchmark, when you write policy, you should always look at benchmarking with other jurisdictions. We stayed within Seattle, the Bark Police Department, Alameda Police Department, and I put here 5 different jurisdictions in which either a minimal reliance of force, strive to use minimal amount of force, or a minimal use of force standard exists. And this is within this jurisdictional of the Bay Area. So Berkeley is not outside of the norm. It is not performing or implementing something that is not within other jurisdictions. One important thing to say here, the strive to was suggested to the city council. City council took the strive to language out and implemented the shall. One of our compromises at the subcommittee level was to go from shall to strive to. The strive to was the language in the city of San Francisco and is the current language which is under revision now of the Bark Police Department. I just wanted to put that kind of context for you folks there. For the next slide. In terms of the legal review, because it is important to note that at no time did the union or the police department say that they were going to take this to a court case, that they were going to engage into a legal challenge to the change to the policy. And we know the reason that was because the atmosphere and the push by the city council, they had the support of the city and they had the support of the community. But also in that is the 9th court decision Mahoney versus City of Seattle, in which the Seattle Police Department argued that the changes in the working conditions of the Seattle police officers were going to cause danger and they needed to not happen. The city, the 9th Court District Appeal rejected that notion and said that it is acceptable for a jurisdiction to implement a stricter standard as it relates to a use of force policy or standard way beyond the reasonableness of the Graham v. Connor, which a lot of jurisdictions in the United States called it the Graham factors when they're evaluating cases or allegations of misconduct related to uses of force. I also added here that this went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court of the United States denied certiorari. They said we are not going to hear this case, which made the 9th District Court of Appeal valid, particularly as it related to introducing within uses of force policy a minimization aspect. So there's no legal factor or reasoning whatsoever for the jurisdiction of the city of Berkeley to go back to a standard based on a legal aspect. I added here Vanita Gupta, which was a deputy attorney general for the United States. At that time, she presented in 2010 at Perth on principles of force, in which she testified that the constitutional basement is Graham v. Connor, that it is acceptable for jurisdictions to go higher for that on a stricter standard. And this is 2010, 2015. So even from the DOJ perspective, regardless of whether it's DOJ now or DOJ then, there was a legal opinion in which this is not a problem of a legal issue, whether you can cannot implement a stricter standard. I added the Barnes versus Felix, which is a 2025 case here. The reason why I added this case, because it goes to talk about proportionality. And we have in some of the arguments that proportionality is a question that needs to be answered, because proportionality, when you're implementing use of force, can be a little bit too restrictive. And within the decision from the Supreme Court, it legitimizes that broader proportionality analysis needs to take place. So this is relevant because the minimal standard, the surface standard, has no legal basis for a change. And on legal review, the Supreme Court level and at the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, it was sent back as accepted and allowed to be done. In addition to a DOJ opinion from a former deputy attorney in the United States. Next agenda, please. Next up, page, sorry. So that gives you a broad context of what were the background for the use of force policy finally getting reviewed when we knew in 2017 that it's something we wanted to do, but it was held back because of different reasons, and then we had COVID. And of course, the participation of all stakeholders and how present the unions and the police department were, and how the concerns that they had were operationally, training and implementation wise, not really a strong push to go against implementation of the use of force policy. Some legal documents. The chair wanted me to talk about some aspects that are collaborative within the use of force policy changes. Way beyond the duty to intercede, the sanctity of life, the review of the policy, which we specifically put in the use of force policy, that review process within this jurisdiction, away from the belief that all other policies could be implemented with a window, understanding that there's some policies, as the use of force policy is, that require a higher level of vetting and a higher litmus of evaluation. The chair was talking about the grab that can be taken out of the reporting levels at level 1. I agree with that. I think the concern still, the factor to consider is whether the person was able to articulate that at the grab there was more than a level of discomfort, and whether that person is allowed to say that that level of discomfort does exist. The concern that we always have as a use of force reporting on a blue panel review is what is the beginning of the use of force and how de-escalated or escalated. What use of force, whether it's a grab or a control hold, because the passive effect of resistance will lead to handcuffing, will lead to the subject having more of an active resistance, then will lead then to a dynamic takedown. It would lead then to an excessive use of force allegation. So having some kind of documentation, even though it's not very important, particularly if a higher level of force gets utilized, could be relative and important in measuring the escalation, as well as a complete picture of how the use of force was utilized. I also believe that the spoke wheel on how use of force is used should be taken out completely out of the policy. It is antiquated. It was based on the 8-chem weight and the movement at the time in 2020 to establish a process by which officers were going to be able to articulate or decide what kind of force we're going to use. At this time, I don't think it's longer a feasible, practical thing to do, particularly with CIT training, ICAT training, and de-escalation techniques. I think that it's no longer, it's needed. I think that, and I wanted to add here as an extra, nothing on the standard, on the minimal reliance use of force standard with objective and reasonable or technically necessary, which obligates the police officers to be able to articulate the reasons behind the floor. So nothing precludes a police officer to use whatever force he or she needs to be necessary to accomplish their objective. What it does is it puts a benchmark in front of them to say, have you used the minimal amount of force, the minimal interaction, have you de-escalated enough? And if you haven't, if you're able to articulate that, regardless of whether it takes 5 minutes, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 minutes, then you're able to use whatever force you think is necessary. But you should be able to look at that as a primary option before you go into the higher force options. And I will leave it at that. This is a 12-page. I sent the chair and the interim director a 12-page policy analysis. I shared it with the city attorney as well as the mayor. So this is concise and 12-page policy gap review into 5 pages, and I hope it's useful.
Thank you so much for presenting.
8% are better than I do.
No, I think that all of these materials are helpful. I think that this topic is, there's a lot of components to it, and so. We don't need to decide everything today, but I think, your presentation is good for framing the initial SR. I do want to open it up to board member questions if you're open to that.
Absolutely.
And if there's any questions about clarification, George is a repository of knowledge, both on the standards, but also on the history. So if there's any questions on that, turn it over to you guys to ask if there's any.
I have none.
Okay.
Thank you.
It would be helpful for me, if you could, George, stay for a bit of the discussion. And also, Chair, if you could frame this for us, yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Oh, but I'd like you to, because
Oh,
it's gonna help me figure out my question. Actually,
Um,
like, where are we with this? What is the time frame?
okay,
Yeah.
sure. We can do a little more
Interact.
interactive with George here. So
Wait, so we're now going on to your letter or we're?
Well, I just wanna understand
yeah,
procedurally where we are, because
okay, yeah, let me do procedurally just and we'll go back to questions for Georgia and then we'll pivot to the letter if we don't have any questions. Procedurally, we don't have a deadline set by council to bring this anywhere. The department has expressed interest in continuing to move these conversations along. Initially, they said June to me. It became obvious that June was not really feasible. And so now they're saying July. Their staff report would be due the first week of June. However, in my last exchange with them, the thing that I did was, as I explained in my memo, was give them a list of 50 substantive differences in the policy that they're revising compared to the one that we currently have. And they have said that they're going to come back and explain either why that substantive obligation or change was made, or where they see that substantive change incorporated into the new policy. I think that process is going to take more than a week. And so it really is up to them how they decide to handle that. I do know from speaking with the mayor and other council members that they would prefer for us to discuss this amongst ourselves first before the department submits anything to the council. And so I don't know, I haven't discussed with them like what that looks like. But I'm trying to schedule as many meetings as possible. I do think that because there are so many changes that I see being made, we have to approach this a little bit more bite-sized, where if I want to bring to the board things that I think are ready to go. So that's what I'm doing today with the reporting thing. But in terms of the entire policy, I'm sort of doing a more iterative approach as I'm meeting with the department. So
Okay.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, so a question I have for you, George, I just wanna understand. Cause this is awesome, but it kind of assumes we're all in the weeds on it, like you and the chair have been. And I'm gonna be honest, I haven't. I've been focused on surveillance technology, right? There's only so much one can do. So it seems to me what you're sort of refuting, both directly and indirectly, is this assertion that all of these things that happened around George Floyd kind of happened without the department being very involved. They were imposed on them. They didn't have an opportunity to weigh in. Hence, they shouldn't be expected to adhere to it now. And I think what you're saying is they were quite involved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then the other thing that the main thing that department wants to do is get rid of this minimal force standard. And they're saying this is an onerous, unworkable requirement. And you are saying it's not unworkable. Here are many other jurisdictions that are doing it. The part I'm not tracking very well is the proportionality. So can you explain that a little bit further and how it relates to, if at all, to this minimal amount of force standard?
So as a background, the standard was written by a former chair of the PRC, well, 3 chairs of the PRC. Alison Bernstein, former public defender in the city of San Francisco, Easy Ramsey, former chair and federal, AG, and myself. So when we wrote this standard, which was based on benchmarking of other jurisdictions, we understood that in order for it to be a workable minimal use of force standard or minimization of force standard, it needed to be objectively reasonable. And I get to your proportionality question. Objectively reasonable, objectively necessary. In other words, that it had to be able to be the police officer had to articulate the reason why the force was necessary, was reasonable. But beyond that, the question was it proportional? And when you're talking about reasonableness and proportionality of force, you have to take into consideration the circumstances behind it. What is the nature of the crime? Is the individual under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Is the individual suffering from a mental health episode? Is the individual having combative, active resistance against a police officer? Is the individual not willing to identify themselves? Is the individual, because of the nature of the call, creating a danger to the police officer, to the public, or to themselves? So the reasonableness and the proportionality of force has to be based on those circumstances. So if you look in the policy right now, I believe that there are approximately 20 items that are considered in how a police officer has to determine what the reasonableness of the force is, effects of drug or alcohol, the availability of options and their possible effectiveness, training and experience of the officer. Another thing to consider is 250-pound individual, 150-pound police officer. Is that a dynamic as well? It is a dynamic as well. What are the consequences of reasonable expectation that it could be danger to the community if the individual escapes? And prior awareness of this individual. Do we have a history of this individual having mental health episodes? Has this person has a record before? Has it been violent? Right. So how you determine the reasonableness of the actions and the proportionality by which has to be based on this, right? But pretty much is determined on the interactions. I think the question is, I mean, let's say, for example, if you, and this is where somebody who is, the folks that are responding to calls for service are quite important in how they give that information out to the officer, right? The dispatch is quite important. If the dispatch gives elevated information to a police officer, that kind of elevated energy goes into the interaction. So if the police officer has to determine, based on the circumstances that are in front of them, not on prior circumstances or other external circumstances, what the conditions are and the interaction with the individual, then that officer can determine whether the escalation was possible, whether CIT is necessary, whether ICAT training comes into place, and what kind of proportionality and reasonableness can be used when they're affecting force to do their objective. But the concern here is that if it is one level of methodology or response to every single call that a police officer has that could possibly, maybe, not sure, but probably have a negative interaction with an individual, and you have one thumb rule of interaction with that individual, which is negative force, the amount of force to create compliance right away, then you are negating the ability to use the least amount of force necessary to your objective, and you create mistrust and you lose legitimacy. That's when we talk about crowd control and crowd management. If you have a posture of negativity and force within those, within that kind of experience, and police are coming at 100 miles an hour and start beating everybody up in order to dissipate the protest or the demonstration, you are having a posture that you get the same reaction back. So if being able to determine the conditions of the interaction before making the decision that you're gonna have to use all the way in force, because you have to think of the proportionality of the responses and interaction with the individual, then you can determine reasonableness. And within that reasonableness, you might affect the escalation. And within that, you might avoid your own safety, your own danger to yourself and to the public or to the individual. And not getting to a case of an allegation of use of force, or worse yet, excessive use of force. I hope that gives you a little bit of a
The
context.
interplay, yeah, okay.
Just to build a little bit on what he's saying, the standard is on, page 24 of the supplemental.
I just have to say that when you folks are evaluating this, if I can put a pin on this, it is important that the standard is quite important. You cannot reverse engineer the policy away from the standard. If the standard is to continue as it's been benchmarked in the Bay Area and has been started decisively by the Supreme Court and the Ninth District Court of Appeals, as the minimum use of force standard is a viable, feasible, implementable standard, then that's what the rest of the use of force policy pivots from. It can be individually review an aspect of the policy and then go back to the standard.
Thanks, George. I think what's difficult about the standard, the standard is the biggest topic that we're gonna discuss. I don't have a recommendation here today on the standard. I haven't discussed the standard with the department in full detail yet. I have discussed it in some detail. But I think at bottom, right now our officers are required to consider what and actually to pursue the least amount of force necessary to achieve their goal. And the proposal by the department is to allow officers to go back to the Graham standard, which is to allow them to pursue what is reasonable according to their perspective at the time and also proportional to what they understand the situation to be. So there's a different iteration, like there's a different series of mental steps that the officer has to evaluate before engaging in force, and also a different standard that they're held to under our policy.
Okay.
A perfect example of that might be Anita Gay. Anita Gay was a situation in which, and this is a deadly use of force in the city of Berkeley, two of them, right? One that's in custody for Kayla Moore, and the police involved shooting of Anita Gay. In Anita Gay, the circumstances dictated that the police officer used deadly force. Undoubtedly, because Anita Gay was running with a knife to kill or stab her granddaughters. Absolutely. But in the case of Kayla, what a different kind of use of force, will de-escalation, CIT, ICT training, what that precluded from the force to be excessive and possibly causing the death of an individual, right? So there are instances in which the police officer is justified, and it's all about, we call it awful but lawful. It is a question whether the force is justifiable based on the circumstances, but situations in which that doesn't exist. There's not an individual running with a knife to stab someone else. Are there other circumstances with the least amount of force can affect your objective without getting involved in a situation in which the casuality of the use of force can create a different perspective or a different end result.
Thanks, George. Are there any more questions for George? Or any questions? Okay, so I think thank you so much. I think that is background and a segment of many segments to come potentially. We'll have multiple people present, and also we'll invite the department to come present on things that they feel are important enough to come to us as well. Not on everything, but on like maybe a discrete issue that they feel is important. I think that today, one thing that I'm asking and bringing to the board is to approve something that is not what George touched on. He touched on it at the end, which is about the reporting requirements. And so one thing that we have in Berkeley is we have a different levels of reporting we are required to report all levels, all uses of force, but those are categorized differently. And so level 1 use of force is the least amount of force, and the levels are on page 36 of our packet. I don't know if you want to turn to that. And then it goes all the way up to level 4. And so the department is proposing a revision to the level 1 use of force reporting. And I think their revision is reflected on page, let's see. Everything is out of order, but I can just explain what it is if I can't find it quickly.
We did 62.
Well, that's the red one, but I don't think that's the. It could be. Well, let me just tell you what they're doing, so, and then we can find it if needed. So level 1 is has a very particular definition, so it's officer use any of the following techniques, and the circumstances of that application would lead an objectively reasonable officer to conclude that the subject did not experience more than momentary discomfort. So these are all instances where an objectively reasonable officer would not expect there to be more than momentary discomfort. Now, the next, just to contrast this really quickly with level 2, if you look at level 2, which is on the next page, actually 37, it says the similar techniques, but where it would lead an reasonably objective officer to conclude that the individual may have experienced more than momentary discomfort. And so the difference between level 1 is there's not an expectation of more than a momentary discomfort, and level 2, there is an expectation that the individual would err. So for level 1, the department is proposing to eliminate C, D, E, and F, I believe. Is that right? C, D, E, and F. And so they would still be reporting on control holds and pain compliance techniques and leverage, but not on grab, body weight, moving someone to the ground, and takedown. I believe that's right. Maybe takedown might still be included.
Takedown is still included.
Oh, takedown is still included.
Yeah, but it's a table.
Oh, it is still included. It's on, my table is on page 8 of the packet. Just so everyone's following along here. And I think the rationale that they presented made sense to me, which is that it's really hard to know what constitutes a grab. And that subjectivity across reporting across officers leads to inconsistent reporting. And it also is not a helpful metric because not really any other jurisdiction tracks that. So we don't actually know what work that is doing. Whereas on the other hand, pain compliance techniques, control holds are things that officers are trained on that they know when they're using, for example. And so those are more like concrete, et cetera. I think that, to me, the only question that I had to them was, well, wouldn't you want more reporting on things that officers are not trained on and still using versus things that they are trained on and using? But I think the ambiguity and also the effectiveness or like the utility of the reporting kind of outweighed that question for me. So that's really the proposal. I do want to like take a second though to talk a little bit more broadly about what I've been doing with the department, because this is not like it's helpful to see the output, but it's also helpful to see like what's going on in the background. I think with the department, most of us were there in December when they presented to us, and I think the presentation left me thinking one thing, and I think it's been clarified that my thinking was incorrect. I thought that at the presentation, they were saying that we were not in compliance with state law. They clarified that that's not what they're saying at all. That because I think my conversations with the city attorney's office, but also my understanding of like the different drafts that have gone through, it's very clear that we actually did incorporate even pending state law that the city attorney's office did incorporate, and the department did incorporate SB 230 and also the law that George was referencing 392, AB 392, and then also a subsequent law in 2022. So all three of these things have been incorporated into our use of force policy over time. So there's not really anything in state law that is compelling a different use of force policy. And I think the department agreed with that in our conversations. I think that the questions really for them have come to operationalizing some of the questions around operational ambiguity around certain standards in the policy, and also the desire to streamline the policy. And when we talked about the streamlining concern, I think like I understand the desire to not have like an unwieldy policy, like something that's you know, 30 pages long, like if we can say something more succinctly, we should. Because it's helpful for clarity, it's helpful for operational effectiveness. I think that one thing that I pointed out to them was, you know, if we're streamlining, we should be retaining, if the goal is streamlining, we should be retaining substantive obligations and not just like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And we have a disagreement about what substantive obligations have been eliminated in the process of them streamlining. And so that's the current process that we're involved in, is even just aligning on the fact that things that they took out were a substantive obligation that have been changed. So we don't, the reporting requirement is not part of this, I'm just giving context. The third thing is around operational ambiguity. And I have really asked them for concrete examples around like, you know, like as George pointed out, the department raised concerns around training, operational ambiguity, and efficacy and implementation in 2020. And what I'm hearing are the same concerns being brought up right now. And I've asked for examples, and you know, the department, you know, the captain said it's actually hard to give examples because it's hard to tie it to the policy language itself. And I was like, that's a fair, I'm like, yes, I agree with you. And so they're still working on getting examples to me. But I think the things that I've highlighted for the board are empirical statistics around the fact that I think that our department actually trains our officers well on the current use of force policy. I think that's evident in the rate of sustains that the PAB has given. It's evident in the rate of allegation, even just like pure allegations around use of force. That fact that those numbers are very low. We've had 2 sustains for improper use of force in 5 years. That's extremely low. We've also, the department's pure use of force numbers. Department highlighted in their annual report that their use of force in calls for service for level 3 or higher is at 0.94%, extremely low. And I think that is a reflection of the fact that we have this standard that is around minimal it emphasizes it mandates de-escalation. And so I like in putting these examples to them and saying, I actually think you're doing a great job. I don't know why we're going to change that. So that's the conversation we're having right now. I'm still open to what they have to say to me around like giving examples around things that could be clarified, et cetera. And also there's a lot of other substantive obligations that don't have to do either with reporting or the minimal use of force standard that we're going to talk about too. So I just want to highlight for you where we are in the discussion. But I think when the department is willing to give and can give concrete reasons for ambiguity, for example, what constitutes a grab, and also the administrative burden associated with that, they have like 3 levels of supervisor review. It involves body-worn camera for this very ambiguous thing, not much ethic utility. Like I understand that. I think the board should recognize that, and I think the board should appreciate the balance that we have to strike here. So that's why the reporting requirement is the first thing I'm bringing to you, is because it's like really the thing that I agree with on them. The other things I'm still discussing. So that's where I'm at right now with them. And I want to put the reporting requirement on the table for discussion, but I also after that want to hear if you have any feedback for me that I can like use to inform my discussion, questions you might have that can feed the substantive obligations part of this as well. So I'll leave it there and open it up to questions, comments from the board.
It was very thorough.
I'm in the weeds, guys.
I think it's great. I really appreciate your work on it. And I think tonight I fully understand what the issues are for the first time. So I think it's super helpful. I was gonna ask why because there is no practical impact of approving this, right? Other than you can consider it a tabled issue from your perspective in terms of our omnibus feedback to the department and the council, like this one's done with her, because they're not gonna go, or are they trying to implement portions of the revised model?
No, I'm taking it to us in bite-sized pieces so that when I bring it back, we don't have to discuss everything.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So I hold your recommendation.
Wait, can I ask one other question? I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't, and this is, I'm sure it's such an obvious question, but the staff report that's being presented, you said June 4th?
Yeah. That is what they have, that's what that's time when they told me, yeah.
And the staff report is their, what is the staff report?
It's their submission to council, essentially.
But don't we already have?
So, I mean, like, the good faith effort we're doing right now is to modify that, if we can reach any sort of agreed to modifications, they might.
So that's their attempt to modify what they had already kind of presented to us based on feedback.
So let me put it a different way. If we can't reach agreement on additions or subtractions to their submission to us in December, they're gonna submit what they already submitted. In June. Does that make sense?
I still don't, so then what's the thing in June, sorry,
So in June, they
so
submit
like June, like next week,
2 weeks from now.
yeah,
2 weeks from now, if we don't have any. They have said, I don't wanna hold them to a deadline that they might miss, like, it doesn't, you know, like,
Yeah.
they might not put it forward at June 4th. But, as of right now, they're gonna submit what they submitted to us in December, in June. As of
Okay.
right now.
that just seems so curious to me. Based on the fact that you're having conversations with them and,
Look, I agree with you, and
Yeah.
I think that they might agree with you.
Yeah.
And if someone were here, they would
They-
probably agree with you.
I got it, yeah.
I think it's been a little fluid.
Yeah, okay, very good. Yeah, no, I was just, it just was kind of curious that they'd be moving ahead, given that you're presenting this to us and you said you're gonna come back to us with more thoughts of like,
Look, I agree.
okay,
Yeah.
cool, yeah, I also second.
Yeah, well, remember, Alan,
So if we approved your recommendation. Does that mean they agree with it and put it in the report they're giving in June, or that's great, you said that, Bob, so what? I mean, I'm not clear.
yes,
What
great, good
the
question.
effect of us doing this.
The effect of us is essentially, when they do submit it, I'm gonna come back with a proposed letter, and it'll be incorporating the recommendation that we're building out here today.
So then the council has to make a decision.
Well, they've recommended this as well, right? So
Yes.
This is one where there wouldn't be any point of contention.
No, I understand that, but I read your comments and
Yeah.
there are others you don't agree with and.
Which are not before us presently.
No, I understand, but ultimately, what happens?
Yes, ultimately, we will make a recommendation. It could be 50% in agreement with the department and 50% not. That will get submitted to the council, and the council will then be able to
Got
decide.
it,
Yeah.
okay.
But I think like this was the clearest low hanging fruit, and I thought it would be a good introduction to the board on what the road ahead. And also, you know, honestly, a showing of good faith from us.
Totally.
That I,
Yeah, it's perfect.
you know, it's. We might have started off on the wrong foot with this policy if you read my letter about where this is going. So I mean, I'm trying to like, you know, do the best that I can where we are. But I thank you for the vote. Is there any other questions on that?
Well, I'll second the motion if nobody else has.
Sure, we'll, can we give Warren Brown?
I'm happy to.
Okay, great, okay, great. Let's go with the vote, and then let's see if there's any.
I did, but I'm happy to defer.
Excuse me.
No, but I happily will defer.
Okay, and so, yeah, let's go forward the vote, and then we'll have a little second to discuss afterward as well.
Board Member Furco,
Yes.
Board Member Allen,
Yes,
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Cantona.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, great. So I want to give maybe like 5 more minutes. I want to give it to Interim Director Lee. I'm sorry, I'm back this to you on these conversations.
don't worry.
Yeah, Interim Director Lee has also been in these conversations, at least for the last one, right? And if you have, I'm not giving comments or observations on the process going forward, you are sure.
No,
Okay,
you're doing a great job, you're in the weeds.
sure.
So, appreciate all the work.
Great. And then does the board have any, not action, but like reflections on the piece that we're not voting on? There's a long Excel that I included in here about substantive. It might be too premature to weigh in on that. I don't know.
I honestly, it was hard. I didn't read through the.
That's okay. That's why I'm bringing it to in bite size.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, I think that, I guess I just think as a negotiating strategy, I don't know, I mean, it's wonderful that you did this. But I think we are gonna have to pick our priorities and really focus on them as opposed to hopefully we won't be in the position of having 50 points of disagreement. But
That's not
if-
my goal.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if we were, or 49 after this reporting thing, if we were, I would say, I'd like us to kind of think about like our top 5, because it's just really hard to get your arms around this, and I'm sure it will be for council as well.
Yeah.
So that's more just like a strategy rather than a substance thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Appreciate that. Let me tell you that if we approve 3 things, as a result of these conversations, my ultimate recommendation will be a red line of the current policy changes those 3 things and not anything else. I mean, like that's gonna be like the policy red lines that I will suggest we submit to council, because otherwise it's too difficult to red line their red line. But I do wanna narrow. I might agree with a lot of what they're saying. I just haven't been able to discuss every single one of the 50 things with them. We're gonna get through, maybe like me and directly are gonna meet with them, and we might be able to knock out like 15 out of each meeting, whatever. That's, we'll see where we go from there. Okay,
Just one,
Yes.
maybe you and I should figure out what we want to focus on in our discussion. We might not have time to get through other things, so maybe figure out what's significant, like minimal speed, for instance.
yeah, I'm waiting, I guess I'm kind of waiting to hear what they say, just because that'll help whittle it down too, but
Okay.
maybe I agree,
Right.
maybe we get down from 50 to 20, you know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because we may hear a rational that makes sense. Say, hey,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, if there's no further, thank you, George, for coming and presenting, he's like that, let's go to, 9. D. I'm pulling it up, which is. Discussion action, that's all right,
Annotated agenda.
here we are, 9D. Oh, yes, discussion action regarding city council's actions taken on May 7th, 2026 concerning the VPD's proposed surveillance technology ordinance, police equipment ordinance, approvals, policy, police contract authority with flock safety. I'm gonna give it to Director Lee for initial report out, or.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then me and Vice Chair will also report out, I think.
Okay, well. It was a long meeting. Unfortunately, it was the only item on the agenda, it was started at 5 and ended at 11:10. The council heard 2 hours of in-person public comment and an hour of online public comment. They eventually. So the short version is that the council landed on. In terms of the whole flock platform. Landed on. Rejected them, each one, and gave the department a year to develop an RFP. For that process, so that was really, I think, in large part by driven by the issues that this board raised, and I want to give credit to Vice Chair Wilson, who really got down in the weeds in identifying some issues with the procurement process. There never really was an acknowledgement that it was flawed, but I think there was enough there to make the council understand that it could have been done better, and because of all the discomfort that many of the council members have with block, they certainly weren't ready to award them a contract, to integrate these various technologies. I think, again, I think the board, was a helpful and positive influence in that way. They did vote to extend the current contract for the APA automatic license plate readers with block for another year. A year, measure. It's 2 years. And it was
12 months.
Oh, okay, 12 months, okay. And so the chief has already begun her process of formulating the RFP, and the PAB and my office are going to be a formal part of that process. As the chair had mentioned. And I answered a couple questions from the council members, and then Chair Cayetano phoned in and made a very forceful case. And he didn't hear it, but I told him that he got a big round of applause after he spoke. This was remote, so.
Vice Chair Wilson, I want to read the chief's email to us so that we have more context.
Okay.
But I also want to give you, do you want to do that?
No, okay.
Okay. This is like kind of the action item on the table for us. But let me just read the chief's email for everyone.
And is this in our packet?
No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
It was sent Tuesday, like
Okay.
yesterday.
Yep.
So she said BPD is preparing to issue a request for proposals for the public safety technology package as directed by council. I'm writing to invite you to participate in shaping the procurement and evaluating the responses. The RFP, assuming all approvals are in place, will include the following 6 components and will be structured as a single solicitation with divisible awards, meaning each component can be bid and awarded separately or in combination. Number 1, drones of first DFR, drones of first responder, and docking stations. Number 2, unmanned aerial aircraft systems, UAS drones. Number 3, automated license plate readers. Number 4, pan-tilt zoom fixed site cameras. Number 5, community privately owned video stream integration. And number 6, investigative software data platform. And then she goes on to talk about the participation model. She says to protect procurement integrity while keeping the process inclusive, we are using a 2-tier participation structure. Tier 1, voting evaluate. Named individuals who attend all vendor demonstrations, score proposals against the published criteria, and recommend an award. Tier 1 evaluators sign conflict of interest and confidentiality acknowledgements and participate in closed scoring deliberations. And then Tier 2, invited observer, attend vendor demonstrations, and the observer Q&A portion of each demo may submit written observations to the RFP coordinators within 48 hours of each demo. Tier 2 participants do not score, do not attend closed deliberations, and do not vote on award. Specific requests, PAB, a request that the PAB designate 2 PAB members to serve as Tier 1 voting evaluators. Additional PAB members are welcome to attend demos as Tier 2 observers, subject to limitation that, Brad referenced, limitation. And then there's going to be a BPA member and one from HOTPA. And then there will be additional voting evaluators from the RFP project managers, BPD senior crime analyst, investigative team, flex team, BFR team, BPD command staff. And then the chief wants our designees no later than May 27. So we have to vote at this meeting for them to nominate 2 people. Yeah, that's what her email says. The only other thing that I'll add is, as I mentioned to Deputy Chief Tate, I do want us, and I think the council, in fact, instructed us to be involved in the RFP process. And so that will be in parallel with like all this other stuff that we're figuring out as well, the surveillance acquisition report, but maybe one of those doesn't like. We also need someone to be the liaison for the RFP, and in addition to the voting.
I don't totally understand the distinction or like how the sequence.
Between which 2 parts?
The RFP and then the being a party to.
So the RFP is sent out. Sorry, we developed the RFP. The department develops the RFP.
Mhm.
They publish it. The city manager publishes it.
Mhm.
Vendors bid on it.
Right. But you were saying you feel like we or the council wants us to be part of the development of the RFP.
Motion, does anyone have the motion?
Yes. Right.
It's in the.
Yeah, it's in the pack.
What pages are on? No?
It's page 72, it's number 4.
Yeah,
Page 73.
thank you. Page 72, or well, are you on a different thing?
Should I just read it?
72.
Refer to the city manager.
Yes, that's it. Read it out loud.
Can you read that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Or sure, go ahead.
Refer to the city manager the initiation of an RFP process in consultation with the Police Accountability Board and BPD.
Yeah.
For each of the components of the MSA and further integration.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's fairly explicit there, and also, that's what me and the mayor just talked about, so, I think that it really is, we did this process with it before. We did it with a different early intervention system where the department drafted the RFP. We just kind of like, I was the one who was there and was like, yeah, that aligns with like what I think we've talked about that we're looking for. It incorporates the elements, like let's publish it. And that was basically the essence of it. I think that at this point, there has been a lot of input into the specifications and system requirements, data privacy requirements, operational capabilities that have already been discussed and fully aired out. And so making sure the RFP includes all those elements, like that's really what the purpose is.
Right, I guess the area, I'm sorry, I'm like Ken's here, but like, it's just curious to me that like, we're evaluating vendors before the RFP.
No, that's what I was gonna explain. The RFP sent out, vendors then bid on it, and then we have.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, so, if the two people who are assigned to be the vendor evaluation, I think should be the two people who evaluate the RFP. I think that makes the most sense.
Yep.
I think that's all I got to say on this. Is there any, Vice Chair Olson, do you wanna say anything about this whole process or where we're at?
Just that, I am surprised that we would be getting an RFP out that quickly. The RFP should include the draft master services agreement that we want the vendor to sign, for example. And there were a lot of issues that we identified with the multiple iterations of the flock MSA that we saw, so. Because when you put something like this out for RFP, you want the vendors to say whether or not they are going to adhere to your MSA. Or in their response, they have to identify provision by provision what they object to. That's a really important part of the RFP, so. I guess I'm just like a little bit confused about the process. You say we did talk about requirements, we really didn't. They came up with some at the very end of that last process we went through.
Yeah.
And there really haven't been clear requirements developed for the surveillance platform itself. And there are major differences between the vendors in terms of like automatic aggregation and sharing now with everybody in our network, or we aggregate and we share only based on things the client affirmatively does in the system. And those are different sets of requirements. So I guess I'm a little concerned about this timeline, because it feels like we're always in a position with them where we're being jammed up on time and like racing to respond. So that's what I would say about the process. I think I am really scared to volunteer because it's a tremendous amount of work and I spend a lot of time on this already. But obviously it would make sense for me to be one of the people because I've kind of gotten into it already. But if there are other board members that want to do it, I'm more than happy to support from the background, so.
Well, I think you should do it, and I don't know, I'm open to other board members joining. I personally am really involved with the use of force, but I do know that board member Nash, who was gonna be here today, but also expressed interest in it, so unless there's a board member here, one of you two who are present and want to be involved, either of you, I more than welcome you to be involved in this. But we have a second person who would be able or willing to do it as well. I don't.
There was no, my job requires me to, it's hard for me to pull away most days between 9 and 5. So
it will be, there will be a fair amount of things between 9 and 5 because the vendor interviews and demonstrations are between 9 and 5.
Okay, that's a bit.
Okay.
I'm not up to speed yet.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
You don't wanna send me in there.
I wanted to give you the opportunity to say no and or yes.
It's a great way to get up to speed.
I wouldn't mind, would they object if I sat in for some of
Well,
it?
you can be a tier 2 participant for sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
the other problem is I have a presentation that night to the board, school board,
which night? Sorry, which night?
the 27th.
Oh, that's a different date. Like that's not a date. That's a date where we have to just give them names. It's not a presentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a deadline. It's not a. a presentation. But I think I would suggest we go with Vice Chair Wilson and Board Member Nash if there's not an objection.
I didn't go second.
Is that, are you good with that? With this shit?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the use of force policy is really gonna be the thing that I'm focusing on right now, and I'm good. No problem. Okay, let's vote on that. I move that we appoint Vice Chair Wilson and Board Member Nash to be our tier 1 observers for the vendor selection process for the surveillance items.
Second,
Okay, I'll do a quick roll call vote.
Sorry, are you gonna have, did you?
So we don't have, my only thing is, I don't think we need to vote on a tier 2 observer. I think we just need, anyone can be a tier 2 observer. We just need to make sure that we're not like
Okay.
breaking boundaries. That's sort of like my position. I don't know, do you have a different?
No.
Okay,
will somebody notify me of that?
yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
we'll coordinate all the dates for everyone
Okay.
in case they want to join. Yeah, okay.
So the roll call, Chair Pitts, on the motion. Board Member Bills Charco,
Yes.
Board Member Allen,
Yes,
Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
And Chair Patton.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. I just want to say last word before we move on to the next item is that I really do think that the public and the council really heeded our input and really appreciated our very hard work on this, and especially by Chair Wilson. So thank you all for, being in the weeds on this. And
And I want to say too that, it was a great example of people changing their minds because there were not 5 votes for that outcome. Even the day before the meeting, it didn't seem like it, so, kudos to our council members, I think, for being thoughtful and really willing to consider information without bias and predetermination and change their minds, so that was great to see also.
Yeah. Okay, I would like, I will give the director a chance to weigh in on this, but I also would move that we table this item 9E. Even though fully aware of the fact that it's going before this public safety committee, I don't think anyone has prepared action on this, but I wanna, Director, do you have any thoughts on tabling 9E? Which is the survey acquisition report, yes.
This is, I'm sorry, did you say something about when it's going? Because I.
It's going to the public safety committee on June 2nd. Yeah,
Well, it's now, we're not, for this.
I don't think it's now or never. I think, I,
That's true.
yeah,
No, I don't have the problem with it. I think, but I think we might wanna have a discussion with, on the points that, Vice Chair Wilson had raised in that. The order in which things were happening, we want to put them out there. Since it's.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thing I would like is to write a letter to the public safety committee saying. We're concerned about the sequencing. We believe that the RFP should, and the development of the requirements as part of the development of the RFP should come first. And, yeah, so I guess that's what and that we pose the question of the necessity of doing this opposition report at all. I thought we independently, we asked the department and they said they had asked for the attorney's office, right? We didn't ask for the attorney's office directly. But,
I did ask them about. What?
okay, but what we heard from the department today is they confirmed that they don't have to do this at all.
Yeah, that is true.
So I guess what I would propose is that we write a very brief letter to the public safety committee saying. The department does not feel it has to do this. We feel it's premature and should not be done before the deliberative work required to develop the requirements. Because if you read this opposition report, there are elements of it that are functional requirements. That's why I'm harping on this. So I think it's not that I'm saying I disagree with it, it may all end up in the RFP. But I just don't think we should be advancing all this before we list out what we want these systems to do. So that's the letter I would say. They say it's not required. We would like to postpone it until after the RFP is developed. Period. Hopefully he does with it, whatever the. That's my motion, actually.
How are you gonna ask for an RFP and then give them the requirements later, after they submit a bid?
Well, this is slightly different. This is saying, we're going to council to get the approval, this acquisition report. And the use policy before we've outlined what we expect these systems to do.
Yeah.
And through this process, that's supposed to involve us in some kind of collaborative effort, that's the other thing. Because this is not collaborative, this is like just presented to us 3-4 days ago. Right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, so. Theoretically, we're gonna work together in this RFP. Here's this stuff, here's what we want this stuff to do, that's collaborative. This is like pushing this forward very quickly. It also references FLOC because, as Deputy Chief noted, the surveillance report requirements include specify that a vendor must be identified, which is also very odd, given that we are going to a competitive process. And I don't think we even want it to reference FLOC as a benchmark, given all the concerns that have been raised about FLOC. So, yeah. My motion is we write a brief memo in alignment with what I said earlier.
One thing I was kind of confused about hearing you and then reading this is that they talk about, it says to search, to implement this software that enables personnel to search, correlate, and visualize records the department already maintains. Or is otherwise authorized to access. So I read that and I was just like, it's just essentially like to help them comb through what they already have.
Well, they don't currently have, so what they're doing, what they want is one platform that is going to be fed drone footage, fixed camera footage, ALPR footage, and community video, your home video. This is FLOC Nova specifically allows you to do more than comb through it. It allows you to do things like caravan prediction. Based on where this car and license plate has shown up on the ALPR, we see that it's with these groups of other license plates. That's a caravan prediction. Therefore, we can predict that it's going to be in X, Y, or Z part of the city. We can, if we see that one license plate over there, then we can predict this other group of people is with them based on. That is much more powerful than like combing through data, and that we don't have the capacity to do now. And in addition, this is the platform that allows for the data sharing with other agencies.
This
is the underlying platform that
I
allows.
guess, but so is this just a typo then? That it's where it says the department already maintains? Visualize records the department already maintains.
Or will, they don't do it right now.
Or is otherwise authorized to access.
We don't have drone footage right now, but they will.
Right, it still just seems like curious that they wouldn't say or will. Or I don't know, it's just, well,
They're not gonna say, footage that we are not authorized to have. I don't know what is the significance of that statement to you? Because if they're.
Well, because I mean, to me, if again, because I wasn't actually reading this with the eye towards, oh, this is for the purpose of FLOC. I was reading this as like, they're looking for some tool to, again, comb through and make sense of the data that they already have on their existing files. But the only data that they have from FLOC right now is from the ALPRs, right?
Right.
So then I guess so to me, it's how yeah, so I'm just confused if the purpose of this is for all the other.
I think actually FLOC is doing their cameras also, right? Edgeworth is doing the camera, and not Edgeworth, the Genetech is doing the cameras for parking.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they have more than just flock. And more than just ALPRs on flock right now. Yeah,
Good.
Look, I'm good with the letter, I think it's, I'm trying to understand, so that's, the point that you're making is one. The second point is the timing. And the third point is about the timing of the submission to us. And then the third is about, our general like. Concern about wanting to be involved in this process per the council's recommendation. And to make sure that's happening.
yeah, and anything that is sort of effectively specifying requirements should be done as part of the development of the RFP.
Sure.
And that's all, that's it. And it's again, not that we may not land here, I don't know, but I just feel this is pushing it ahead of any work that we've seen on the RFP itself.
I'm good.
Well, I think a motion.
Okay, second. Okay. I'm gonna friendly amendment to have Vice Chair Wilson write like a page letter.
Okay, it's not gonna be a page.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that directors will help me. Oh, okay.
Okay. Board Member Lutrego,
Yes.
Board Member Allen,
Yes,
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Cayetano,
Yeah,
the motion carries.
okay. Do we have any other action items on the community video stream, which is also going before the Public Safety Committee? Separate conversation. Something that was presented to us in February, March, I think.
We already gave a lot of feedback on that as part of that whole submission that we did. And we have not seen their revisions that are going forward. Right,
I don't think there are.
She said.
Oh,
that
you're right,
it's
you're right.
them Also, I don't know, we haven't seen any.
Yeah, that was actually news to me, I did. So, no action items on that.
No.
Okay. Right, we will also have the opportunity to review it after, it's going, but, we're only, here we are. Okay, let's go now to. I'm sorry, can we go back on it? Yeah, item 10, public comment,
Okay,
okay.
we don't have any virtual attendees, I do see one number here. Just sec.
I will try to stay within the time on the first of all, I just want to say I'm very, very happy to see Kathy Lee back in the position of interim. This is really a relief to me that they've got you back, and I know it's a lot of work. I appreciate this very much. I really appreciate all the work you have all done about surveillance and are now doing about the use of force with overseas. I do want to point out to you, in that, in the action, item of it says refer to the city manager, the initiation of an RFP process in consultation with the Police Accountability Board and the BPD. It names the Police Accountability Board first. It does not say that the BPD should be leading this. This is not a suggestion from the council. This is the direction from the council. And it's really important to members of the public who are very concerned, and I am, about this whole direction of surveillance, that you all be equally in charge of this RFP process, so that we don't end up, for instance, with an RFP that describes, oh, surprise, surprise, exactly the product that Flock sells and nothing else. And that all the concerns that you had brought up during the conversations about surveillance actually are requirements within the RFP. So I'm very grateful to Vice Chair Wilson for being willing to work on that. And I really, hope that you will all be very strong in your voice and not allow the BPD to say, well, we got your input now, thanks very much, we'll just now do what we want to do. And not allow the council to sort of back off on the fact that they have put you jointly into the RFP process with the BPD, not as a subsidiary to BPD on this. That's the main thing I wanted to say this evening. I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the beginning. I had to be at another meeting first. And as always, thank you very, very much for your work.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you. And with that, Chair, we have no additional public speakers.
Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, we'll go to agenda item 11, which is closed session.
Okay, audio and video recording will now stop. Chair, we are back online.
Welcome back, everyone. The board approved staff's recommendation for 2 cases and it administratively closed 2 other cases. With that, we'll go to agenda item 13, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Great, thank you, everyone.